work at a company called, we're downtown, and we are a digital marketing agency, and so I do a lot of full stack JavaScript. One of the preferred IDEs that we have in our office is PHP Storm. How many of you guys use either PHP Storm or WebStorm? And then keep your hands up. What if you use Visual Studio? There's a few, yeah. So you're gonna love this. This tool is like my favorite by far plugin for PHP Storm or WebStorm, and it's called Wallaby. It is not the marsupial from down under. Instead, this is a plugin that is known as the Intelligent Test Runner. It basically has two kind of major claims to fame. One is that it only runs the tests that are needed and it runs them in parallel. So if you do test-driven development, this will like speed up the process. And the second is that it gives you feedback in the IDE. So for those of you that have recently realized in the Chrome Dev Tools, it's starting to give you more feedback. Like when you console log things, you're starting to see them in the actual Chrome Dev Tools. It does the same sort of thing. So in order for you to get this set up, you have to obviously install the plugin for either PHP Storm or Visual Studio. And then once you do that, you basically start up your little process inside of PHP Storm. And right away, it's going to start giving you feedback. So one of the things you have to do is make sure you set up a little JSON file. In this case, you're just going to tell it that these are the tests that I want you to run. These are the files that I want you to watch. And in addition to that, if you're going to do Node, like server-side testing, you also have to like bootstrap it for Node. Otherwise, it's going to assume that you're going to do some client-side testing. And then once you enable that and you turn on your spec files, and you'll start to see kind of in the columns from looking at my server spec file here, and I go ahead and start the test runner. I'll see, looks like syntax error. It's expecting a tokens. Let's fix that real quick. Oh, it doesn't like all this. So now if I restart. So immediately I'm going to start seeing in the bottom there, it did a really quick index of the files, and it basically kind of loads everything up and makes sure it's in memory so that it can then be able to execute only the tests that are necessary based on the changes that you make to the code. So the first thing I'll probably do is go into my server spec, and I'd write out my spec, and in this case, it's going to immediately start giving me feedback, and it's going to say, hey, you made a assertion that your script, say something, should equal a hello message, but instead, it expected hello world. So in this case, I could just go into my code and either fix that, or I could change my test and say, okay, I actually expected it to say hello world, and I'll get a passing test, right? Super cool. You get a visual indicator here in the column that tells you, hey, your test is now passing. But better than that is I could actually click on this, and it'll give me a link to go over to my actual code. Actually, it doesn't do that. On the other side, if you're in the actual spec file or the script file, you'll get a link over to the test. So in this case, if I go to my server test here, I can see here's the actual test link, and so this will take me directly to where it's passing now. If I were to change this and make, again, a failing test, so in this case, we're just going to say hello. And so in this case, right away, I get a red indicator in the column telling me that this line of code is failing a test. And so you'll get this line of either green or red or gray indicators in your column telling you that you either have test coverage, which is great if it's either red or green, or you'll get a little gray box telling you that there's no test coverage for this particular line of code. You need to write a test in order to get better coverage for your code. So in essence, like I said, this gives you real-time feedback, and it's super, super fast. As I was changing the code, you'll notice that it was starting to show which tests it was running in the background here, and it was executing all these tests as I actually started like keying up and changing this. So as I start like changing this, it's going to continue to run this until I actually type in, I think that's what matched the test. All lowercase. So in this case, all lowercase should immediately pass the test. That fast. So as you're typing your code, you're getting like immediate, like lightning fast response. And the same thing on the other side. So in the case where I'm running my client-side script, I can run, and as I start uncommenting the tests or uncommenting the code, I'll start seeing my tests actually pass. So I can just uncomment everything. So now I'm running the client Wallaby, and right away you see I uncommented the code, I got green bars and all lines of code. Any questions?
So I use the context.
Okay. There's no coverage yet, but they are working on some context.
So I have some plugins that will act up like JavaScript, where I have a bunch of files that
I have. I don't know what will qualify as a lot of tests. We probably have about like, not thousands. I've never tried it with thousands, but I can tell you it does a very efficient job of like chunking the files that it thinks that only need to be tested, and that it's only going to run like those few tests. So as soon as you start changing things, it's only going to run those tests. So it should be able to handle that pretty efficiently. One thing I would be cautious about is it needs to kind of from the very beginning when you first load the app, it needs to kind of figure out like your entire code base. So it does take a minute for it to like index at the very beginning when you start the plugin. And then you need to make sure if you're using like any of your own, like it knows the node modules folder. So if you're writing node, you'll basically be able to understand, it'll understand like all the requires that are like node modules that have been loaded. But if you're going to load your own modules, you have to make sure that you also include those in the JSON file. So there's a JSON file for the server side plugin, and then there's another one for a client side plugin. So you just have to include those in your files. It has a very hard time figuring out files that you don't specifically tell it are like in your dependency chain. Like you have to explain what the dependency chain is at the very beginning.
Which specific frameworks is this for?
So
like working Jasmine right now, or
it'll pretty much work with any of them. So you can tell it the framework that you're using, because I didn't define one here on the client side. It'll default to Jasmine, and then on the server side, I believe it defaults to like Mocha. And then the assertion that I added was like should, but you can use any expectation library like Chai. So it's pretty flexible. Again, what I like is like the feedback right in the IDE, so as you're coding, you're like seeing things like right away. Any other questions?